The city was cold, built from tall black metal towers that touched the sky. Lights flickered in the fog, and the air always smelled like rust and rain. In the center of the city stood a giant platform made of steel and stone. People gathered. There almost every day, but not for a festival or a show. They came to stare at her, the monster in chains. She was huge, her body tall and powerful, with deep purple skin that glowed faintly under the dull lights. Her hair was long and dark, hanging in messy waves over her shoulders. But the most terrifying thing was her eyes. Bright, glowing violet eyes that seemed to burn like fire in the dark. Heavy metal chains wrapped around her arms, legs, and neck, locking her to the platform. She never spoke to anyone. She just sat there, head low, eyes burning with anger or maybe pain. Everyone called her a beast, a demon, a danger to all life. Stories spread like wildfire. She had destroyed cities, swallowed soldiers whole, and cursed entire planets. No one knew if these stories were true, but it didn't matter. Fear was stronger than truth. The guards stood close, guns ready, though she hadn't moved in years. Then one day, a human walked into the city. His name was Eric, a traveler who didn't belong to any world. He had heard of the chained monster and wanted to see it for himself. As he walked through the crowd, whispers followed him. "Careful, human," someone said. "You don't want to get too close." But Eric didn't listen. He stepped closer to the platform, his eyes studying the chained figure. From the distance, she looked dangerous. But as he moved nearer, something strange caught his eye. Her face wasn't twisted in rage or evil. Instead, she looked tired. Her glowing eyes flicked toward him, just for a second, and in that brief moment, Eric saw something no one else did. Sorrow. "Why is she chained like this?" Eric asked a guard. The guard laughed. "Because she's a monster. She'd kill us all if we let her free." "But she doesn't look like she wants to kill anyone," Eric said softly. "That's because she's waiting for a chance to break loose and destroy us all," the guard replied. "Don't be fooled, human." Eric stood there watching her. The wind moved her hair slightly, but she didn't react. She just stared ahead, silent, chained, and alone. Something about it didn't sit right with him. A true monster would roar, fight, or at least try to break free. But she just sat there, almost like she had already given up. The people around began to lose interest and drift away, but Eric remained, watching her. He noticed how her hands trembled slightly, as if she was cold. He also saw marks on her skin, scars from the chains that had been there for so long. Then, something unexpected happened. A sound so soft that Eric thought he imagined it. A whisper. He stepped closer, careful not to alert the guards. The sound came again, faint words in a language he didn't understand. The chained woman was whispering to herself. What is she saying? Eric whispered to himself. No one else seemed to hear it. The guards joked and talked loudly, not paying attention to her quiet words. Eric knew he had to understand her. Maybe she wasn't a monster. Maybe there was more to her story. As he stood there, their eyes met again. For a moment, her glowing eyes looked directly into his. Not with hate, but with sadness. She blinked slowly, almost as if asking him to leave. Well, he still could, but Eric didn't leave. He stepped back, but his mind was racing. He needed to know more. What was her story? What was she whispering? Why did she seem more human than beast? The city's night grew darker, the lights flickering as the wind howled between the towers. Eric walked away, but he promised himself he would return. He had to know the truth about the monster in chains, because sometimes what the world calls a monster is just a prisoner waiting to be heard. The next morning, Eric returned to the Kika platform, but this time he stayed hidden in the shadows. The crowd gathered again, pointing and mocking the chained woman, but Eric's eyes stayed sharp, watching her closely. She sat in the same position, chained and silent, but every few moments, Her lips moved quietly, carefully. She was still, whispering that no one else seemed to notice. They only saw a monster, but Eric saw someone trying to speak. Something about her whispers pulled him in, as if she was telling a story no one could hear. I need to understand her, Eric thought. But how? I don't know her language. Determined, Eric wandered through the alien market in the lower city. The market was noisy, full of different species selling glowing crystals, strange fruits, and mechanical parts. Somewhere here, he thought, someone would know the monster's language. He asked many traders, showing them a sketch he had drawn of the chained woman. Most shook their heads, refusing to speak of her. One old alien woman with wrinkled green skin and glowing white eyes stopped Eric. You want to know the tongue of the cursed one? She asked in a voice like crackling leaves. Yes, Eric replied. Can you teach me? The old woman looked at him carefully, then whispered, That is the old language of the Obari people. A language nearly dead, like the cursed one herself. Why do you wish to know it, human? I don't believe she's a monster, Eric said firmly. I think she's trying to say something, and no one listens. The old woman nodded slowly. Very well. But know this, if you learn her words, you carry her pain too. Eric didn't hesitate. Teach me. For days, Eric returned to the old woman, learning the forgotten tongue of the Obari. The sounds were strange and heavy, but Eric practiced tirelessly. As he learned, the old woman told him the history of the Obari. They were a proud people. She said, tall and strong, protectors of their world. But when invaders came, they fought back with power. Some say they used dark forces to defend themselves, and the galaxy called them monsters. Is that what happened to her? Eric asked. No one knows. She is the last of her kind. That night, Eric returned to the platform again. The city was quieter under the stars, and fewer people gathered. He stood at the edge of the platform, heart pounding. Then he whispered in the Obari tongue, Who are you? The chained woman's eyes snapped open, glowing brighter. She looked at Eric, truly looked at him, as if seeing him for the first time. She whispered back, her voice broken and hoarse, You speak the old words. Eric nodded. Yes, I want to know the truth. Tell me. She stared at him in disbelief. No one had spoken to her like this in so long. Slowly, she spoke her name, Ciliara. Ciliara, Eric repeated softly. Why are you chained? Her face twisted in pain, both physical and emotional. Because I was cursed, she whispered. They feared me ... because I fought back. Eric wanted to ask more, but the guards noticed him standing too close. Step back, human, one shouted. You don't want to end up like her. Reluctantly, Eric moved back, but his mind burned with questions. She wasn't a mindless monster. She was Ciliara, the last of her people, cursed and chained because the world feared her strength. That night, Eric made a promise to himself. He would uncover the whole truth. He would find out who cursed her, why she was truly feared, and maybe how to free her, because behind every whisper, there was a story. And Eric was ready to listen. The next night was darker than usual. Thick clouds covered the moons, and the cold wind howled through the metal streets. But Eric was not afraid. He returned to the chained woman, hiding in the shadows until the crowds thinned and the guards grew lazy. He stepped closer to the platform, his heart racing. In his mind, he repeated the Obari words he had learned. Then, with a deep breath, he called out softly, Ciliara. Can you hear me? Her eyes opened slowly. That glow violet and strange locked onto Eric. She looked tired but also surprised. No one had ever called her by her real name. You remember, she whispered, her voice dry and rough. You remember my name. I learned it from you, Eric said gently. I want to know your story. Ciliara stared at him for a long time, as if deciding whether to trust him. Then, with a shaky voice, she said the first word that would change everything. "Protector," she whispered. "What?" Eric asked, stepping closer. "I was a protector. Not a monster," she said. "My people, the Obari. We lived in peace. Until the Empire came." Her voice was weak, but her words were clear. She told him how a great empire had attacked her world. The invaders wanted to steal their land, their power. The Obari resisted, and Ciliara was chosen as their strongest warrior. She led the fight, and for a time, they held back the empire. But then they cursed me, she whispered. They used dark science. They changed my body, made me grow, made me ugly, made me ... Frightening, my people feared me. The enemy spread lies. They said I turned into a monster. Even my own people abandoned me. Eric felt his chest tighten. He could hear the pain in her voice, the sorrow of betrayal and loneliness. She wasn't a beast. She was a victim of war, twisted and used. "Why didn't you fight back against them?" Eric asked. She looked down. "Because when I tried, I destroyed too much. I couldn't control the power. I was scared ... of myself." She lifted her chained hands weakly, showing the deep scars. "They caught me. They chained me here, for the galaxy to see and fear. They want people to remember me as a monster." Eric's fists clenched. Everything she said made sense. The Empire didn't just want to win. They wanted to erase her people's history by turning their strongest protector into a nightmare. "You're not a monster," Eric said firmly. "You're still a protector." Her eyes softened for a moment. She whispered, "You're the first to say that." At that moment, a loud voice rang out. "Step away from the platform, human." The guards had noticed Eric again. Reluctantly, Eric backed away, but not before he looked Ciliara in the eyes and said, "I'll come back, I promise." She watched him go, a tiny spark of hope flickering in her heart. It was the first time in years that someone saw her not as a beast, but as someone worth saving. As Eric disappeared into the shadows, his mind was set. The galaxy had lied. The truth about Ciliara had to be uncovered, and somehow ... he would find a way to break her curse, because now he knew her name, her story, and the first word that changed everything. Protector. The night grew colder, but Eric's resolve burned hotter than ever. He couldn't forget Ciliara's words. Protector, betrayed, cursed. That wasn't the story the galaxy had told. No one knew or cared about her truth. They only wanted the legend of the monster to stay alive, because it was easier to fear than to understand. But Eric couldn't ignore it now. He needed answers, real ones. The next morning, he journeyed deep into the lower districts of the alien city, where knowledge was traded like weapons and truths were as dangerous as lies. In a hidden tavern, he found a scholar named Talvik, an old alien historian with silver eyes and scales like stone. "I need to know about the Obari people," Eric said, sliding credits across the table. "And the curse that was put on them." Talvik chuckled, counting the credits. "Curious human. That story is forbidden for a reason. But since you're paying, I'll tell you what's left of it." He sipped a glowing drink and leaned in. The Obari were mighty, peaceful, but proud. When the Empire wanted their planet's resources, they resisted. They had no choice but to fight, and Ciliara, she was their fiercest warrior. But she was cursed, wasn't she? Eric pressed. Ek nodded. The Empire couldn't defeat her in battle. So they captured her and used ancient biotechnology, something even we don't fully understand. They forced her body to grow, twisted her flesh, and made her a giant. But worse, they made sure she would lose control of her powers. She destroyed invaders, but also her own people by accident. Eric's heart sank. That explained her sorrow, her guilt. She had been turned into a weapon that couldn't distinguish between friend and foe. The Empire then spread the story of the monster of Obari. They chained her publicly to make an example. "Resist us, and this is your fate." "Why?" Hasn't anyone tried to help her? Eric asked. Because fear is easier, Talvik replied grimly. And because her chains are no ordinary metal, they are biotech chains connected to her curse. No one knows how to break them. Eric leaned back, thinking hard. There must be a way. There is a rumor, Talvik said quietly. A surviving Obari scientist escaped the purge. They say he lives on a forgotten moon, hiding from the Empire. He might know how to break the curse. Where can I find him? Eric asked quickly. Talvik scribbled coordinates on a piece of old paper. If he's still alive, that's where he'll be. But be careful, human. If the Empire hears what you're doing, they'll kill you. They don't want her story rewritten. Eric thanked Talvik and left the tavern, his heart pounding with a mix of fear and hope. He had a lead now, a real chance to save Selyara. But time was running out. He overheard guards in the streets saying the city leaders planned to execute the monster soon, claiming she was too dangerous to keep alive. That night, Eric returned to the platform once more. The air was heavy, the wind sharp. Selyara looked weaker, her head hanging low. He climbed closer, ignoring the glares of the guards. I found a way, he whispered to her. There might be someone who can break your curse. I have to leave the planet to find him. Her eyes opened slowly, glowing with a faint light. Why are you doing this for me? She asked in a broken voice. Eric smiled softly. Because no one should be chained for something they didn't choose. I see who you really are, Selyara. For the first time, a tiny, almost invisible smile touched her lips. You're strange, human. Maybe, Eric chuckled, but I'm your best chance. He squeezed her chained hand gently before slipping back into the shadows, ready to leave the city. Selyara watched him disappear. For years, she had whispered into the dark, unheard and forgotten. But now a human had listened, and just maybe. Freedom was no longer a dream. The truth beneath the chains had been spoken, and soon the galaxy might hear it too. The sky above the alien city burned with shades of deep red and dark purple, a storm gathering on the horizon. But Eric was far away now, inside a stolen transport ship, speeding through the blackness of space. The old scholar Talvik's coordinates led him to a forgotten moon called Orathan, a barren and icy place lost to most star maps. Eric knew time was against him. Back in the city, Selyara remained chained, and the city leaders had set the date for her execution. If Eric failed, she would die, remembered only as the monster in chains. He gripped the controls tightly, pushing the engines harder. He couldn't fail. After days of rough travel, Eric's ship landed on the frozen surface of Orathan. The air was thin, the ground cracked with ancient ice. A single lonely structure stood ahead, an old observatory half buried in snow. Eric approached carefully, weapon ready, though he hoped he wouldn't need it. The doors groaned as they opened. Inside stood a tall, thin alien with pale skin and glowing blue eyes. His hair was silver, his face aged but sharp. I've been expecting someone, the alien said with a quiet voice. You're here for her, aren't you? The cursed one. Yes, Eric answered. I was told you might know how to break her curse. The alien sighed and walked deeper inside. I am Velik, the last scientist of the Obari. I created the curse that binds her. Eric froze. You did this to her? Velik nodded slowly. Not by choice. The Empire forced my hand. They held my family hostage. If I refused, they would have killed everyone I loved. I made the weapon, and I've regretted it every day since. Eric's fists clenched, but he kept his anger down. Can you undo it? Velik looked at Eric with tired eyes. There is a way, but it is dangerous. The curse is locked in her blood, her bones, her soul. The chains are part of it. To break them, a ritual must be performed, one that requires a direct connection between her mind and another living being. What do you mean? Eric asked. You, Valak said. You must link your mind to hers through the ritual. You'll enter her mind, face the curse itself, the darkness that feeds on her fear and sorrow. If you survive, the curse will break, but if you fail, both your minds will shatter. Eric's heart pounded. The risk was clear. But his mind was made up. I'll do it, he said firmly. Valak studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Very well. But we need special ingredients to complete the ritual. Rare materials not found here. What do we need? Valak listed them. The core crystal of Tiner, a bright blue gem that held psychic energy, sold only in dangerous black markets. The heart ash of Vernax, the remains of a dead star creature, found in the ruins of a collapsed station. And finally, the breath of Miralis, a rare flower that bloomed only once every 100 years, deep in the caves of Orathan itself. It won't be easy, Valak warned. You will face beasts, thieves, and worse. And remember, time is short. Eric didn't hesitate. Tell me where to start. Valak smiled faintly, a trace of hope in his ancient face. Start with the caves. If you can find the breath of Miralis, the other tasks may yet be possible. Armed with a map and a stubborn heart, Eric set off into the icy wasteland. The caves were dark, narrow, and freezing cold. Strange creatures slithered and crawled in the shadows, their glowing eyes watching. But Eric pushed forward, lighting his way with a torch and keeping his weapon close. Hours passed until he finally found it, a glowing flower, blue and silver, delicate and pulsing with light, the breath of Miralis. As he reached for it, a shadow moved. A massive ice beast, all teeth and claws, lunged from the dark. Eric rolled aside just in time, firing his weapon. The blast burned the creature's side, but it wasn't enough. The beast roared, shaking the cave walls. Eric grabbed the flower carefully, then sprinted, dodging the creature's attacks. Rocks crumbled, the cave collapsing behind him as he ran for his life. He barely made it out, collapsing into the snow, the flower safe in his pack. One down. 2 to go. Bruised and breathless, Eric returned to Valak, who prepared the next route into the black markets of a nearby pirate station, where the core crystal of Tiner could be bought, if one survived the price. But Eric wasn't stopping. Not when Celiara's time was running out. He looked back at the sky, imagining her chained and alone, waiting for her death. No, he whispered to himself. Not while I'm still breathing. Because no matter how dangerous the plan was, Eric had made his choice. He would bring back every ingredient, face every threat, and stand before Celiara again, not to watch her die, but to break her chains and free her soul. Asterisk, the pirate station floated in deep space like a wounded beast, its metal torn, lights flickering, and ships crawling around it like flies. Eric's small craft docked with a heavy clang, and the airlock hissed open to the sound of shouting, laughter, and gunfire. He had survived the caves, barely escaping the ice beast with the breath of Miralis. Now he needed the core crystal of Tiner, said to be the rarest gem in the galaxy, sold only here, in the most dangerous place Eric had ever seen. Blaster ready at his side, Eric stepped into the chaos. Aliens of every shape and size walked the dark corridors, some with extra arms, some with glowing eyes, others wrapped in strange suits. Fights broke out over spilled drinks, credits, and insults. No one here cared about laws, only power and survival. In the heart of the market, under a cracked dome of glass showing the black void beyond, Eric found the stall of a merchant named Drogan, a hulking alien with metal plates embedded in his skin. You seek the core crystal? Drogan growled. When Eric asked, it'll cost you a fortune. I don't have a fortune, Eric admitted, but I can trade, Drogan laughed. With what? Eric pulled the breath of Miralis from his pack. Its silver-blue glow caught the attention of everyone nearby. Drogan's eyes widened. You have the breath, Drogan muttered. Rare indeed. Where did you find it? Where no sane man would go, Eric replied. I'll trade it for the core crystal. Drogon stared at the flower, then at Eric. Deal, but there's a problem. What problem? Eric asked warily. The crystal is not here. It was stolen by a gang of raiders. They hide in the lower levels of the station. If you want it, you'll have to fight for it. Eric sighed but nodded. Tell me where. Armed with directions and growing exhaustion, Eric descended into the lower deck's dark, damp tunnels where the air reeked of oil and blood. He was ambushed twice, first by thugs who wanted his credits, then by creatures Eric couldn't even name. But he pushed forward, his mission clear. Finally, he reached a chamber glowing with pale blue light. There it was, the core crystal of Teener, resting in the hands of the raider leader, a towering alien with 4 arms and a scarred face. You came for this? The raiders sneered. Many have tried. None survived. I'm not like the others, Eric said, raising his blaster. The fight was brutal. The raiders' strength was overwhelming, but Eric was fast, clever. He dodged, fired, used the shadows, and finally, after a fierce battle, shot the raider in the chest. The giant fell, and Eric grabbed the crystal, its light warm and alive in his hands. Bleeding and bruised, Eric returned to his ship, barely escaping the collapsing lower decks. The pirate station roared behind him as his ship blasted into hyperspace. 2 ingredients down. 1 remained, the heart ash of Vernax. Valik's instructions led Eric to the ruins of an ancient space station near a dead star. The place was silent, haunted by the memory of the star creature called Vernax, which had died there centuries ago. Inside the wreckage, Eric searched until he found a glowing pile of silver-gray dust, the heart ash, but the station was unstable. As Eric collected the ash, the floor cracked, metal groaned, and gravity fluctuated. Alarms blared. He raced against time, dodging collapsing walls and sparks of wild energy. A final leap got him back to his ship, just as the station tore apart in a silent explosion. At last, Eric returned to Orathan, where Valik waited with his tools and knowledge. You survived, Valik said, surprised. Most wouldn't. I'm not most, Eric replied, placing the ingredients before him. Valik prepared the ritual, combining the ash, the crystal, and his knowledge. The core crystal would create the psychic link, the heart ash would burn the curse, and the breath of Miralis, though traded, was replaced by Valik's own secret supply of energy herbs to sustain life. We must hurry, Valik said grimly. The execution begins tomorrow. They boarded Eric's ship and raced back to the alien city. Eric's body ached, but his spirit burned. He couldn't fail. When they arrived, the city was in chaos. The platform was crowded, and Selyara stood weak and chained, as guards prepared strange weapons to end her life. Eric pushed through the crowd shouting, "Stop, I can break her curse." The guards laughed, but Valik held up the core crystal, its glow forcing them to pause. "We have the means," the old scientist declared. "Let us try." With hesitation, the crowd allowed them through. Eric climbed the platform, looking into Selyara's tired eyes. "I told you I'd return." She smiled faintly. "You're stubborn." He placed the crystal on her chest, the heart ash around her, and stood before her as Valik began chanting the ancient words. The crystal glowed brighter, and Eric felt his mind being pulled into her. Suddenly, Eric was inside Selyara's mind, a dark, endless place where a shadow waited. The curse, alive and furious, roared toward him in the form of a great beast. Eric stood firm. "She is not your prisoner anymore." He fought with all his will, his mind burning, his soul screaming. But then Selyara. The chains that had once held Selyara lay shattered on the cold platform, pieces of twisted metal scattered like broken lies. The crowd, once loud with insults and curses, now stood frozen in stunned silence. The monster they had feared, the beast they had hated, was gone. In her place stood Selyara, tall, graceful, and radiant. Her deep purple skin still glowed faintly, but her body was no longer monstrous. Her face was beautiful and sharp, her eyes still violet but no longer burning with rage. They shimmered with life, with peace. She stood, breathing slowly, as if feeling her own freedom for the first time. Eric knelt nearby, weak and tired from the brutal psychic battle, but when he looked up at her, he smiled. "You look different," he said with a chuckle. Selyara looked at her hands, her arms, her body. She touched her face, almost in disbelief. Then she looked at Eric. "I feel different. I feel like myself." The guards didn't know what to do. The crowd whispered, confused, afraid. Some shouted, "It's a trick. She's still dangerous." Others stared, unsure whether to run or stay. But Selyara raised her hands. "I am not your enemy," she said, her voice clear and strong. "I was cursed, turned into something I never wished to be. But I am free now." Her words echoed across the square. The people had never heard her speak before. There was power in her voice, but also sadness and truth. Eric stood beside her, even though his legs trembled. "She was never a monster," he said loudly. "She was made into one, and all of you believe the lie." One of the guards stepped forward, still holding a blaster. "How do we know she won't attack us now?" Eric shook his head. "Because if she wanted to, she would have. Even when she was chained and cursed, she never hurt you. She was waiting, hoping for someone to listen." Valek, the Abari scientist, stepped forward too. "I was the one who helped curse her, forced by the Empire's hand. I have undone what was done. She is no threat to you." The guard hesitated, then slowly lowered his weapon. The crowd remained silent, but the mood shifted. Fear turned into curiosity, and then slowly into shame. They had stared, mocked, and hated her for years without knowing the truth. Selyara looked at them with a heavy heart. "You don't have to forgive me. But know this, I fought to protect my people, my world. I was punished for it. I never wanted your fear." An old alien woman stepped out of the crowd, her face wrinkled and wise. She walked to the platform and looked up at Selyara. "We were wrong to call you monster," she said quietly. "We never saw you only the chains." Selyara smiled softly. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a start. The leaders of the city, realizing that killing her now would be a crime, declared that Selyara was free to go, under one condition: she must leave the planet. The people were not yet ready to accept her among them. Eric looked at Selyara. "What will you do now?" She gazed at the sky, where stars blinked like distant eyes. "I don't know. I've spent so long in chains, I've forgotten what freedom feels like." "Then come with me," Eric said. "The galaxy is big. You don't have to walk it alone." Selyara looked at him, her violet eyes soft. "You'd travel with me? Even after all this?" Eric grinned. "Of course, someone has to keep you out of trouble." She laughed, a sound so light, so pure, that even the crowd smiled faintly. It was the first time anyone had heard her laugh. They left the city together, boarding Eric's small ship. Valek stayed behind, promising to help spread the true story of Selyara the Protector, not the monster. As the ship lifted into the stars, Selyara watched the planet shrink below them. She turned to Eric. "Why did you help me?" she asked softly. Eric looked at her seriously. "Because no one deserves to be trapped forever. And because I saw the person inside the chains." She smiled, touched by his words. "Thank you, Eric." He shrugged. "Don't thank me yet. We've got a whole galaxy to explore." They laughed together, two souls once separated by fear and lies, now united by courage and hope. And as the stars stretched before them, the galaxy whispered of a new story, not of a monster, but of a woman who was feared, chained, and finally Free, because one human dared to touch what no one else would, and in doing so, changed everything.